3 things I wish I would have known when starting to make content about making content, but I now just said this even though I don't mean it exactly like this. What I actually mean is that I would have wished to go through all of the computation of optimizing these decisions in a shorter amount of time, such that I would not be in the position I am now, but basically at a later point in the position on my journey. So basically what I wish is that I would have fastened up or sped up the journey by basically having maybe higher computational power, which I didn't have. But instead, if we think of work output as, or if I define work output as computation multiplied by time, as the computational unit in this case is mostly my brain, then I obviously cannot really, to a certain extent, maybe I can improve the computational output of my brain, but mostly the lever I probably can use is time, and with time basically also accessing compound effects. Now, 3 things I wish I would have known sooner about producing content. Every channel is a product. That's not necessarily every piece of content, because the channel itself, I think, is the product. I, for example, had this one distinction, which is defined as a dualism between something that appears once. Think of it like a book. So something that is published once. A piece of music often is also published once if it is called a singer. An album is also published once if it is called an album. But then on the other hand, you have series. These could be TV series, but these also could be these days podcasts or magazines or any kind of this, or any type of media that is kind of similar to this. Now, again, I did not wish that I just would know the answer, but I wish that I would know the answer, would already knew that I had already known the answer when starting to make content. But I actually obviously cannot. The ability to know the answer to a certain problem also means that I would be able to explain the problem. For this reason, I had to go through the problem in order to then arrive at the solution. So a kind of a not so easy to speed up, or it's not just the knowledge, it's not just one sentence, and then this one sentence allows you to now understand this. What you actually need is kind of the work behind it, and the one sentence might just be the model that represents this thinking, the computation that has gone behind this, the best, or the simplest, or the shortest. So back to product. Even a TV series is not something that goes on infinitely. It only goes on infinitely for a certain period of time. So a TV series is a product that is intended to be played out basically over a period of time. But then the product ends eventually when the TV series is stopped. Every TV series eventually comes to a halt. Maybe it's whenever it's not necessarily the James Bond franchise, which also happens to maybe be a series. But as long as the entities involved in making this eventually die, the series eventually ends. So every channel also is a product. And the product might not be available or in shelf for all of the year. Think of marketing campaigns where, we only have this in stock before and after Christmas, but then it's so rare because we cannot make it because we want to optimize for revenue or something like this, or profit. And therefore we just don't have it in shelf because we also want to be exclusive, similarly to luxury fashion. Nonetheless, one thing that held me from making or testing different kinds of videos on different channels was also the problem I had with making a new channel. There was so much computation involved, and I needed to find the name that is the best, and so on and so forth. But now this would be already the second thing. But back to product. Every channel is a product that eventually also comes to an end. If I die, for example, then if I'm the main part of producing this channel, then probably this channel will also die at some point. But it still might be archived and therefore still be kind of watchable, similar to a series of TV, even though my channels might not be watched as much as a series of TV. Now, product allows me to just say, okay, I'm making this now. I'm basically using mega batching, with batching being the process of making a lot of similar things at one time, such as going to the grocery store, then buying clothes because the store is nearby. So basically doing kind of activities that happen to fit into a certain optimization cluster, mostly in terms of time, that then are basically executed in sequence in order to then overall save time. such as not buying every piece of grocery that you buy in another hour, but actually going to the grocery store once every couple of days maybe. So what the product approach kind of allows me to do is to not see a channel as this ultimate thing I need to make, and this is then the thing everybody will judge me by and off. But okay, it's a product, it's something I make, it's not necessarily me. I am not the product, and no matter what channel I make, the videos on this channel will be the product, and the videos are not me. The videos are maybe a part of my ideas, but as soon as I cut them off me, they are basically a product. And therefore, similarly to how a worker might produce work hours, or somebody else might produce something else, or a farmer might produce produce, which is still kind of growing on his land and so on, but as soon as he sells it, it's just a product that is now sold and gone forever. And similarly, of course, now with these topics often touching close to my thoughts and so on and so forth, these are also just thoughts I have, and I don't need to be identifying with these thoughts too much. So by allowing myself to see a channel as a product, I can also say, okay, this product didn't work, let's just make another product that is slightly different. But similarly to how an iPhone might also have a next generation, not necessarily that I make multiple generations of the same channels, but a channel is just a product, and so this is the point I was trying to make. Now, the second one. Making the thing I can make. Now, to a certain extent, this counters the product approach. Nonetheless, if I want to make a documentary about, I don't know, let's say it's Abraham Lincoln, then the main problem is that Abraham Lincoln no longer exists, so I would have to find an actor, I would also have to find funding, lighting, and so on and so forth. But if instead I want to talk about a thought I had 10 minutes ago, then this thought is already in my head. It's basically, I don't even have to script it, because it's in my head already, so I can just, if I have a proper setup, which then goes into the third point I will be trying to mention as the thing I wish I would have known sooner. If I then just have a given setup which I don't alter too much and don't have too many decision variables on, one could say, then I can just turn this into something. Now, and then eventually this, when I have many of these ideas, this eventually will be kind of a product. Now to a certain extent, the second thing is also a simplification rule. It's allowing myself to record the things I can make, and therefore I am using this as a, not necessarily production constraint, but as a production rule, which allows me to simplify. And so often I found myself in the last couple of years trying to make something I couldn't make. Instead, and this created barriers. This created barriers of entry, because every time I wanted now to make something, I would have to hit all of these different thresholds for, okay, I need to be this and that and this and that and this and that, but I'm not this and that. And since I am not this and that, I cannot make this video as of now. And it would also look ridiculous if I make a video talking about the things I actually think, because then, well, I expose the thoughts I have, but I only can document the thing I already have happened in my life. And by using also this documentation approach, then I can just make the things I can make instead of trying to make the things I should make or I think I should make. This is so obvious, but there is an overlap between the things I should make, basically, and the things I can make. And I obviously can only make this subset of things that I should make, which I can make, which is obviously the highest priority things I should make, not I should make, I can make, but nonetheless, I cannot make things I cannot make. That's obviously true, but I need to make the things I can make, but with the highest priority of should make, one could say. The third thing now is simplification. Simplification and simplification and simplification and simplification. Recently, I've been thinking about how to increase my production rate. Since turning into an adult at the age of 18, or to the age of 18, one could also say, I have made on average 3 videos per day. And that's ridiculously low, because I wanted to turn this into the thing I am doing as a career, kind of, to a certain extent at least. Now, 3 videos is not enough. I have to have a multiple of the production rate. And so simplification, simplification, and simplification. as soon as I started off on a project, I would say, okay, but what if I need to do this and this and this and this and this? In the beginning, I would watch these YouTube videos. Can you still make a channel in 2013, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20? What is now different? What is a video? A video is something that is recorded by a camera, often with a microphone. And what this captures is me, in this case. If I am, at least in this case, standing in front of a camera, what the camera captures is me. Of course I could edit, but what editing would do is, if I have a certain amount of hours, I work on a certain type of channel, let's just say, then I have ideation, creation, distribution. The more time I spend in ideation, distribution, the less time I spend standing in front of the camera and actually talking. The more time I spend talking, the more potentially better I can get at talking. And so it's as soon as I basically dive into these other two buckets of ideation and into distribution too much, and obviously I have to also have distribution in there, but it still takes a lot of time. And so the question is, how much can I simplify distribution and the other thing in order to have as much time for creation as possible? And also, how can I make the creation as possible? And I would not see, of course, now for many people there would also be the post-production in this step, but I don't post-produce. I press start and pause and stop. That's the main thing I do whenever I record a video. Now sometimes I walk around in between and so on and so forth in different formats but not in this format. And that's the ideal. Pressing start, saying the thing I need to say, pressing stop. One thing I, for example, had as a distinction, a duality in terms of the format, is the short and the long format. And then I for weeks now, for months, for years actually, I could not figure out how do I simplify this process of production, of ideation to idea, down to basically, okay, I have an idea and now I just turn it into something. Should I now tweet it? Should I then record the tweets? Should I post it on Facebook? But on Facebook, then should I also simultaneously post it to Twitter? And if I then do this, maybe post it to as many platforms as possible, because then I already have kind of the maximum reach as multiplied per unit of content. But then what about this one platform where I cannot do this? And then what does this mean for the overall arching approach? So I would optimize for all of these platforms simultaneously. Here is the thing, I think. If I want to make something, this could be also something else, but now let's just say it's a video. Then the more decision variables that I introduce, the more responsibility comes with all of these decision variables to actually optimize them. If I don't optimize them, then every decision variable that is not optimized could be the thing that is actually limiting my overall production, or my overall success with these videos, or my overall ability to make money from these videos. Now, the more decision variables I introduce, should I produce in 4K, should I produce a landscape, or in something that is vertical, should I produce with this microphone, with this microphone, with this microphone? Of course, many of these decision variables are actually quite important and could be the limiting threshold. And again, therefore, it is so important that one goes through the computation, not the computation in this case, much more the optimization of all of these variables to then result in maybe a simplified product. I think it was a recent book I listened to where Steve Jobs was attributed to the following quote, that you need to work very hard in order to make things very simple. Something like this, paraphrased. I needed to work very hard in the last couple of years, at least whenever I worked on this, to turn this into something that is now that simple, at least in my eyes, where I can just start and then pause again and maybe then eventually stop, and that's the video. And part of it is the optimization of the decision variables that were actually important. But another thing I also can do is exclude decision variables. By not doing thumbnails, I just exclude the thumbnail optimization responsibility. I don't have to watch all of Mr. Beast's videos on how to make thumbnails that look like his. Even though, at least I suspect to a certain extent, that thumbnails on YouTube are actually targeted towards the general YouTube audience, which is not people in their 60s, but maybe just lots of kids. So, as I'm also not necessarily trying to make videos for kids, but for actually adults, kind of like me, also using myself as an audience proxy, because I have access to my feedback, whereas every other feedback, I don't know whether it is valuable. So I am relying on my feedback because I know what I put in terms of work. And so the feedback I have on my videos is, in my eyes, at least at this point, in terms of strategic thinking about how to implement feedback, kind of the most important one. As long as I have still feedback from me, I can still develop. And as long as I can develop the product into something that is better, or the video into something that is better based on my feedback, as long as this occurs, I don't have to rely on other feedback, which I then think of any source. The question is in a health topic, often it seems that you just have to find the right study in order to then kind of prove it. The problem here is that the source needs to be validated. And of course, the source is not valid or not valid, but it is a marginal increase or decrease in value of the source. By using myself as the source of the feedback, this is just an example now, I am excluding the rest. And therefore I don't have to again think about the validity of the source and the optimization thereof. So there are so many decision variables I have kind of optimized over the years. But what it comes down to is simplifying. The best or the easiest product, what is happening between one human and another human? They communicate via this thing called gestic. I think it is the English word, I don't know exactly. Then language, then our eyes, how our eyes look, and so on and so forth, how our voice is modulated. And all of these things are captured in video. Of course, now I could introduce text, and whenever I make shorts, I have text that appears. But then if text appears, do I have all text I say appear? What if I make a mistake? And if I make a mistake, should this mistake then also be translated into text, converted into text? What if then a platform changes its rules and no longer promotes content with text? What is the basic format that excludes the most decision variables? It's just recording me. And this is part 3 of the 3 things I wish I would have at least found out earlier, I could say.